Now that we understand what supplier relationship management really means, let's pause for a moment and ask an honest question. If this concept is so important, why do so many organizations still treat suppliers in a purely transactional way? Not occasionally, not only when things go wrong, but as the default approach. And even more important than why, what does that approach actually cost us over time? And to answer that, we need to look beneath the surface. In Chapter 2, we are going to talk about why transactional supplier management costs you more. Before we go any further, something needs to be very clear. This chapter is not about bad suppliers. It is not about weak contracts. And it is not about poor performance. In most cases, suppliers are doing exactly what they are asked to do. So if suppliers are not the problem, what are we really talking about? We are talking about the system itself, a system that looks efficient on the surface, structured, controlled, predictable. But underneath that surface, it quietly drains time, energy, and value in ways that are easy to miss. That hidden drain is what this chapter is really about. Before we continue, if this helps, please like, subscribe, and press the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming chapters on this topic. I really appreciate you being here. Now let's continue. Now that we have set the context, this is how most organizations see themselves. Most organizations genuinely believe they manage suppliers well. They have contracts in place, costs are tracked, performance metrics are reviewed regularly. On paper, everything looks disciplined. In meetings, everything sounds under control. And because nothing is visibly broken, there is rarely urgency to question the model itself, which is exactly where the hidden problem begins. But this is where reality starts to differ from perception. Behind the scenes, small inefficiencies begin to accumulate. An extra email here, a clarification there, a follow-up meeting just to align expectations. Each one feels harmless. Each one feels manageable. But together, they slowly consume time and focus. And because no one tracks friction, the cost remains invisible. To see why this matters in practice, let's ground this in a familiar situation. A request comes in. It is reasonable. It supports the business objective. But when someone checks the contract, the request sits just outside the defined scope. Not clearly excluded, just not clearly covered either. This is often the moment where momentum starts to slow. From the supplier's perspective, this moment carries risk. Not because the task is difficult, not because they do not want to help, but because the relationship is transactional. In that type of relationship, initiative is not rewarded. Caution is safer. So the supplier pauses, and that pause sets the tone for everything that follows. Once the pause happens, the process takes over. Internal discussions begin. Approvals are requested. Emails go back and forth. Time is lost not because people are inefficient, but because the system demands protection over progress. Eventually, the task is completed, but the cost is already higher than it needed to be. Now imagine that same request in a different environment. The supplier understands the broader goal. They understand the pressure the team is under. They understand why timing matters. So instead of asking only what is allowed, they focus on what is needed. That shift sets up a very different response. In that relationship, the supplier acts first and formalizes later. Not because rules do not matter, but because trust already exists. The same work gets done. The same accountability remains. But the effort required to get there is dramatically lower. And that difference does not come from contracts. It comes from relationships, which leads to another pattern worth noticing. Now consider another common situation. A supplier notices a process inefficiency. They see delays forming. They see duplication of work. They see steps that no longer add value. They could raise it, but they hesitate. And once again, the reason is not personal, it is systemic. In a transactional system, going beyond scope carries no upside. There is no clear signal that insight is welcome. No reassurance that raising issues will be appreciated. From the supplier's point of view, speaking up feels risky. So a quiet decision is made. Months later, leadership looks for savings. A cost reduction initiative is launched. External advisors are engaged. Time and money are invested. Eventually, the inefficiency is identified, often the same one the supplier noticed long ago. The insight already existed. The system simply prevented it from surfacing, not out of indifference, but out of self-protection. And valuable knowledge stays unused. This same pattern shows up again when things go wrong. When relationships are transactional, escalation feels confrontational. Issues are framed as failures. Defensiveness increases. Energy shifts from solving to protecting. Instead of working together, teams focus on assigning responsibility, and progress slows even further. This is the hidden cost of transactional management. It creates invisible barriers. It limits contribution. It prioritizes compliance over collaboration. Suppliers do exactly what is required, nothing more. And while that feels controlled, it quietly limits value creation. So the question becomes, what happens when this changes? One organization chose to change just one thing. They redesigned supplier meetings. Instead of performance reviews, they held problem-solving conversations. Instead of asking what went wrong, they asked what is making work harder than it needs to be. That simple shift changed the tone completely. Suppliers started sharing constraints earlier. Internal teams adjusted expectations sooner. Delays reduced without changing a single contract. Nothing structural changed, but everything relational did, and that difference mattered. This is the real difference between control and outcomes. Transactional management optimizes for certainty. Relationship management unlocks value. In the next chapter, we will explore what actually shifts a supplier relationship from transactional to strategic and how leaders can do this deliberately. Stay with me.